The Crime King's little boy kicked bit and terrified every nanny who stepped inside that mansion. But when a broke plus-size maid walked through the door carrying nothing but overdue bills and a bruised heart, that same violent child kissed her like he had finally found home. What kind of pain turns a 3-year-old into a storm, and what kind of woman can walk into the house of the most feared man in Savannah and see not a monster but a child begging to be understood? Tonight, you're not just watching a mafia romance. You're watching a story about grief, judgment, loyalty, and the quiet kind of love that can soften even the coldest empire. Stay until the end, because the moment this little boy reaches for her will change everything. Like this video and comment where you're watching from. Before that kiss, before the mansion went silent around one crying child and one soaked maid, Savannah already knew the name Gideon Cole. It knew the sound of his cars before they turned the corner. It knew the weight of his silence inside courtrooms, charity galas, private clubs, and dockside offices where men with thick necks and expensive watches suddenly forgot how to speak when he entered. Savannah smiled for tourists under moss-covered oaks and pastel porches, but beneath the pretty squares and riverfront lights, there was another city. A city of locked doors, whispered debts, favors, traded in back rooms and cargo containers that arrived sealed but never stayed that way for long. That city belonged to Gideon. On a wet Thursday morning, he stood inside a glass office above the Savannah River watching cranes lift steel containers from a ship under a bruised gray sky. Rain tapped against the windows like impatient fingers. Below him, workers in orange vests moved between trucks, forklifts, and stacks of freight. To anyone else, it looked like business. To Gideon, it looked like blood flow. Every truck had a purpose. Every foreman had a price. Every cop who parked too long near Dock 9 had either been bought, warned, or buried beneath paperwork so deep he would spend the rest of his career writing traffic tickets in some county nobody visited. Gideon Cole was 38 years old, dressed in a charcoal suit tailored so precisely it seemed cut from shadow. His dark hair was combed back, his jaw clean-shaven, his left hand resting on the head of a silver cane he did not need, but carried because his father had carried one before him. The cane had never been for walking. Men understood that when Gideon brought it into a room, the conversation had already turned serious. Across from him sat Martin Voss, a union boss with sweat shining on his upper lip despite the cold air blowing from the vents. Martin had been loud once. Everyone in Savannah had heard his laugh in cigar lounges and private dining rooms. This morning his laugh was gone. "The Darrow boys have been asking around," Martin said. Gideon did not turn from the window. Asking what schedules, driver names, which containers move after midnight, which foremen look the other way. The rain thickened, blurring the river into a sheet of silver. "And you answered." Martin swallowed. His throat bobbed. "No. God, no. Mr. Cole, you know me." Gideon finally looked at him. "That was often worse than being ignored. I know everyone, Martin. That's what keeps them alive or gets them dead." Martin's hands tightened around his hat. The brim bent in his fingers. "I told them nothing. I swear on my grandchildren." Gideon walked to his desk, picked up a file, and opened it. Inside were photographs. Martin at a gas station. Martin outside a seafood restaurant. Martin standing beside a man Gideon recognized as one of the Darrow crew's collectors. Gideon laid one photograph on the desk. Martin stared at it, color draining from his face. "That wasn't business," he said quickly. "My nephew owes money. I was trying to smooth it out." Gideon sat, slow, calm. You let a Darrow collector stand close enough to smell your aftershave. Martin leaned forward. "I made a mistake. Yes, I can fix it. No." The word landed softly, but Martin flinched as if struck. Gideon signed the bottom of a document and slid it across the desk. Your nephew's debt has been purchased. He now owes me. You are resigning from the union before sunset. Your replacement already understands loyalty better than you do." Martin stared at the paper. "My pension." "You'll keep it." Martin blinked, hope flickering. Gideon capped his pen. "Because I am feeling sentimental this morning." There was no warmth in the statement, only distance, only control. Martin picked up the document with shaking hands. He wanted to thank Gideon. He wanted to beg. He wanted to ask what would happen if he refused. He did none of those things. Men survived Gideon Cole by understanding the shape of the door before it closed. A soft knock came. Gideon's right-hand man stepped in without waiting for permission. Silas Boone was built like an old church door, broad still and hard to move. His hair was cut short. His eyes were pale blue and almost never changed expression. A thin scar ran from one corner of his mouth toward his jaw, turning his resting face into something close to a threat. He did not look at Martin. "House called," Silas said. Gideon's pen stopped moving. Martin noticed the change. Everyone noticed when Gideon Cole went still. What happened? Silas's eyes flicked to Martin, then back. "The new nanny is leaving. She says she wants a police report, an attorney, and her last check sent by courier." Gideon closed his eyes for half a second. "Is Noah hurt?" "No. The nanny bite wound. Broken skin. Mrs. Bellamy says she's done sending referrals unless we increase the fee." Martin Voss sat frozen, holding the resignation paper with both hands. The man who could strip him of power with one signature had just gone silent over a child. Gideon stood. "Get the car." Silas gave a single nod and stepped aside. Gideon passed Martin without looking at him. Behind him, Martin exhaled like a man who had been underwater too long. Outside, Savannah was shining wet and gray. Gideon's black sedan waited beneath the covered entrance engine running. Two SUVs idled in front and behind it. Rain misted the windshield as Gideon slid into the back seat. Silas took the passenger seat up front. The convoy left the port and moved through the city with smooth, practiced force. They passed tourists holding umbrellas near River Street. They passed flower boxes, brick storefronts, horse carriages, church steeples, and restaurants where people would later drink sweet tea and talk about weather weddings and football. Gideon watched them through tinted glass. Ordinary lives had always looked staged to him, like something arranged behind windows for men like him to observe but never enter. His phone buzzed. A photo from the house security system filled the screen. Noah's nursery. A lamp overturned. Bedding pulled to the floor. Wooden blocks scattered like wreckage. In the corner of the image, a framed photograph lay face down. Gideon's thumb hovered over the screen. He knew which photograph it was. Evelyn in a white summer dress standing on the back lawn beneath the live oaks, one hand resting on her swollen stomach, sunlight tangled in her blonde hair. She had been laughing at something Gideon said. He could not remember what. That was the part that still cut him open in quiet moments. He remembered the dress, the wind, the exact angle of her smile, but not the words that made her laugh. The explosion had taken the sound first. He had been in his study when the car started. Evelyn was supposed to be going into town. The bomb had been wired beneath the driver's side, meant for him, built by a nervous mechanic who had disappeared from Georgia before sundown and was found in Alabama 3 weeks later in a river. Gideon had reached the window as the fire rose. Noah had been in the nursery with a fever wrapped in a blanket by the glass. He had seen the orange light. He had heard the blast. He had screamed until his voice broke. After that, the boy changed. Not all at once. That would have been easier to understand. At first, he only cried at night. Then he stopped sleeping. Then he stopped letting women touch him. Then he began throwing things whenever a door slammed. Then biting. Then kicking. Then screaming at sounds nobody else heard. Doctors came. Specialists came. Child therapists came once and refused to return without security. Nannies came with perfect resumes, soft voices, expensive shoes, and emergency training certificates. They left with bruises, tears, and hush money. Gideon paid every invoice, signed every check, approved every medication, installed softer carpeting, replaced glass lamps with wood, removed sharp corners from the nursery, bought toys from Italy, blankets from France, books recommended by experts with degrees he did not trust. None of it reached the boy. By the time the convoy passed through the iron gates of the coal estate, the rain had eased to a fine mist. The mansion stood at the end of a long drive lined with ancient oaks. Spanish moss hung from the branches like gray lace. The house itself was pale stone, 3 stories tall, beautiful in the way old money can be beautiful when it does not care whether anyone feels welcome. Security cameras hid beneath eaves. Guards stood near the gatehouse. A black fence ran the perimeter of the property. Motion lights waited in the hedges. Beyond the house, the river curled dark and quiet behind private docks. It was a fortress pretending to be a home. Gideon stepped from the car before Silas could open the door. Inside, the foyer smelled of lemon polish, old wood, and fear. The housekeeper, Mrs. Leland, hurried toward him, face pale. She had worked for the Cole family for 20 years and had seen enough violence to make most women hard. Noah frightened her in a different way. Not because he was dangerous, but because no one knew how to save him. "Where is he?" Gideon asked. "Nursery, sir. He's under the bed. And the nanny in the sitting room, crying. Pay her. She says she wants more than payment." Gideon removed his gloves. Everyone wants more until they understand what enough means. He climbed the stairs without another word. The east wing was quieter than the rest of the mansion. Too quiet. A child's floor should have been full of noise, little feet songs, toy wheels, laughter bouncing off walls. Here, every sound felt trapped before it could become joy. Gideon stopped outside Noah's room. A low whimper came from inside. He opened the door. The nursery looked like a storm had passed through it. Books lay open on the floor. A stuffed rabbit had been thrown into a corner. The curtains were twisted. Near the rocking chair, the photograph of Evelyn lay face down in its silver frame. Gideon picked it up. The glass had cracked across Evelyn's face. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. A sound came from beneath the bed. Small, animal-like, afraid. Gideon lowered the photograph onto the dresser and crouched. "Noah." The whimper stopped. "Come out." Silence. Gideon waited. His patience in business was legendary. His patience as a father was thin, not because he lacked love, but because love had made him helpless. Helplessness made him angry. Anger was the only language his life had taught him to use. "Noah," he said, firmer now. The bed skirt moved. A block shot out and struck Gideon's knee. Pain flashed up his leg. He did not react. From under the bed, Noah's voice came raw and broken. "No boom." Gideon's throat tightened. "There is no boom." "No boom," Noah said again, louder. Gideon reached one hand beneath the bed. Noah screamed. The sound tore through the room. Gideon pulled back at once, but it was too late. Noah scrambled out the other side. Face red, eyes wide, hair wild from sweat. He clutched Evelyn's blue scarf against his chest. The scarf had once smelled like her perfume. Now it smelled like dust and a child's desperate grip. Noah pressed himself into the corner. No touch. Gideon stood slowly. "I'm not touching you." Noah stared at him as if he did not believe him. That was the part Gideon could not bear. Not the screaming, not the biting, not the chaos. It was that his own son looked at him like he was another danger in a house full of dangers. Gideon took one step back. Noah's breathing slowed by a fraction. Mrs. Leland appeared in the doorway, hands folded tightly. "Sir, Mrs. Bellamy is on the phone." Gideon kept his eyes on Noah. "Tell her I want someone today." She says there may not be anyone left. Then tell her to find someone who needs money more than she fears me." Across town, Maggie Carter was counting quarters under the yellow light of a kitchen bulb that flickered whenever the refrigerator kicked on. Her apartment sat in a sagging duplex near a road where trucks groaned past all night. The walls were thin, the windows stuck in summer and rattled in storms. A brown stain spread across the ceiling above the sink, widening every time it rained. Maggie had placed a mixing bowl beneath the leak and water dripped into it with a hollow sound. Plink, plink, plink. She counted again. $87 in cash, $14 in quarters, a $5 bill with a torn corner, a tip from the diner folded so tightly it looked ashamed of itself. Still not enough. On the table in front of her sat an eviction notice, a power bill with red letters across the top, and the final hospital statement from her mother's treatment. Maggie had tried not to open that one again, but grief made people touch pain the way the tongue finds a chipped tooth. Her mother, Lorraine Carter, had died 4 months earlier in a county hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and overcooked vegetables. Maggie had been holding her hand when the machine slowed. Lorraine had been a church secretary, a pie baker, a woman who knew every neighbor's birthday and still believed people were mostly good even after life gave her every reason to stop. Cancer ate her gently at first, then greedily. The insurance ran out. The medication did not. Hospice wanted money up front. The funeral home wanted a deposit. The cemetery wanted payment before they lowered the casket. So Maggie borrowed from Travis Pike. At the time, Travis had sounded almost kind. "Family comes first," he had said, leaning against his old Cadillac outside the hospital. "You take care of your mama. We'll settle later." Later had teeth. Her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. Maggie stared at it until it stopped. Then a message appeared. "Clock's ticking, sweetheart." She turned the phone face down. Her hands were still rough from the morning shift at Pearl's Diner where she had scrubbed grease off the flat top until her wrists ached. In an hour, she had to walk to the motel laundry and fold sheets that smelled like cigarettes, cheap cologne, and other people's secrets. After that, if her knees held up, she would mop floors at a private clinic until midnight. She was 26 years old and tired in places sleep could not reach. The mirror above the sink reflected a woman she tried not to study too closely. Round face, soft jaw, full arms, wide hips, dark curls piled messily on her head. A body that seemed to invite strangers to comment, judge, smirk, advise, or dismiss. Maggie had learned to move through the world as if apologizing for taking up space even when no apology was owed. Her mother used to say, "Baby, the Lord made you generous in every direction." Maggie used to laugh. Now, standing in a kitchen where the water dripped into a bowl and debt waited outside like a dog with its jaws open, she could not find the sound. The phone rang again. This time, the screen showed Mrs. Bellamy. Maggie snatched it up. "Yes, ma'am, Maggie." Mrs. Bellamy said, voice tight and hurried, "Are you available for a placement today?" Maggie looked at the eviction notice. "I'm available for anything that pays. This is not a standard placement. None of my life is standard lately." Mrs. Bellamy exhaled. Paper rustled in the background. "It is a private household outside the city. Very wealthy. Very discreet. They need immediate help with a child. A nanny job. Technically, yes. Light housekeeping may also be required." Maggie almost laughed. Light housekeeping was what rich people called cleaning a mess they did not want to look at directly. "I can clean. The child is difficult." "How difficult?" A pause stretched across the line. The last caregiver required medical attention. Maggie looked down at her own hands, at the burn mark on her wrist from the diner fryer, at the tiny cuts from cracked laundry baskets. "Is the child sick? No. Disabled? No. Not in the way you mean." "Then what is he?" Mrs. Bellamy lowered her voice. "Grieving." That word changed the air in Maggie's kitchen. She glanced at the small photograph of her mother taped to the refrigerator. Lorraine stood in front of a church bake sale table smiling over a row of peach pies. How old? Maggie asked. 3. Maggie closed her eyes. 3 years old and grieving hard enough to hurt people, Mrs. Bellamy continued, speaking quickly now. The pay is 4 times my usual live-in rate. Cash weekly. You would have a private room, meals included, and transportation if approved by the household security team. 4 times. Maggie's heart knocked once against her ribs. 4 times meant rent. 4 times meant medicine debts could shrink. 4 times meant Travis Pike might stop texting. 4 times meant she might breathe without feeling a hand around her throat. Who is the family? Another pause. I cannot say much over the phone. Mrs. Bellamy. Maggie, listen to me carefully. They are powerful people. The house is secure. The father is demanding private, and not a man you should provoke. Maggie pressed her palm flat on the table. Is he dangerous? Mrs. Bellamy did not answer fast enough. That was answer enough. Maggie almost said no. A sensible woman would have. A woman with savings, family options, a working car, and no loan shark circling her life would have thanked Mrs. Bellamy and hung up. Maggie had none of those things. Outside, a truck rattled past, shaking the window. Water dripped into the bowl. Plink, plink, plink. I'll go, she said. Maggie, are you sure? No, but I'll go. Mrs. Bellamy gave her the address and told her to dress professionally. Maggie looked toward the bedroom where her only decent dress hung from the closet door. Navy blue, thrift store, a little faded, a little tight. She had worn it to her mother's funeral, then to 2 job interviews that went nowhere. Professional enough for desperation. By late afternoon, the rain had returned. Maggie took the bus as far as the route allowed, sitting near the back with her purse clutched in her lap. The bus smelled of wet clothes rubber and tired people. A child cried 2 rows ahead. His mother bounced him on one knee while scrolling through her phone with hollow eyes. Maggie watched the child twist his little fists into his mother's shirt and felt something deep in her chest ache. At the final stop, she stepped down into a puddle that swallowed half her shoe. The driver gave her a look through the open door. You sure this where you want off? Maggie checked the address again. Close enough. He looked past her at the long road lined with oaks and gated properties. Rich folks out here don't usually like visitors walking in. I'm not visiting. The bus doors hissed shut. Maggie walked. The rain was not heavy, but it was steady, the kind that soaked slowly and thoroughly. Her curls frizzed around her face. Her dress clung to her stomach and thighs. Her flats rubbed blisters against her heels. Cars passed without slowing their tires, whispering over wet pavement. She thought of turning around 3 times. Each time, Travis Pike's message floated back to her. Clocks ticking. She kept walking. The coal estate appeared first as a wall, 10 feet of pale stone topped with black iron. Cameras sat tucked into corners. A guardhouse stood beside the gate, its windows tinted dark. Beyond it, she could see the beginning of a long drive of hedges trimmed with surgical precision and the shadow of a mansion beneath the trees. Maggie stopped. For one moment, she was painfully aware of herself. Her cheap purse, her wet dress, her body large and tired and breathing hard, her shoes with the worn-down heels, her whole life carried in the nervous grip of one hand. Then the gate camera moved. A voice crackled from an intercom. State your business. Maggie stepped closer. My name is Maggie Carter. Mrs. Bellamy sent me. Silence. Then laughter from somewhere inside the guardhouse. Not loud, just enough. The door opened and a guard stepped out. He was tall, square-jawed, dressed in a dark suit that did not hide the weapon under his jacket. His eyes moved over Maggie from wet hair to soaked shoes. This job, he asked. Maggie felt the old shame rise hot and familiar. She swallowed it. Yes, this job. He looked as if he wanted to say something else, but another man appeared behind him. Silas Boone. He did not smile. He did not laugh. He only looked at Maggie with the stillness of someone who noticed everything and wasted nothing. "You have identification?" he asked. Maggie handed it over. Silas checked it against his phone, then studied her face. "You understand this house has rules." "I figured. You do not wander. You do not open locked doors. You do not ask personal questions. You follow instructions from Mr. Cole, Mrs. Leland, or me." Maggie lifted her chin. "And the child." Silas's expression shifted by a hair. "What about him? Do I follow instructions from him too?" The guard behind Silas snorted. Silas did not. After a moment, he handed back her identification. "You listen to him," he said. "That may be harder." The gates opened with a low, mechanical groan. Maggie stepped through. The drive seemed longer once she was inside. The house waited at the end of it, pale and enormous, its windows glowing gold against the gray evening. It should have looked welcoming with all those lights. It did not. It looked watched. It looked sealed. It looked like a place where sorrow wore expensive clothes. At the front steps, a woman in a black dress opened the door before Maggie knocked. Mrs. Leland was thin, silver-haired, and sharp-eyed, with the posture of someone who had carried secrets so long they had become part of her spine. "You're from Bellamy?" "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Leland glanced at Maggie's wet dress, but unlike the guard, she did not smirk. "Come in before you catch pneumonia." Warm air touched Maggie's face as she entered. The foyer was larger than the diner where she worked, marble floors, a curved staircase, oil paintings in heavy frames, fresh flowers in a vase the size of a baptismal font. Everything gleamed, but nothing felt soft. Somewhere deep in the house, a child screamed. Maggie's breath caught. The scream was not a tantrum. She knew the difference. She had heard tantrums in grocery stores, diners, clinic waiting rooms. This sound had pain in its bones. Mrs. Leland closed her eyes briefly. "That is Mr. Noah." Another crash followed. Then a man's voice, low and urgent. Then another scream. Maggie's fingers tightened around her purse strap. Mrs. Leland turned toward a hallway lined with framed photographs, most of them placed so high no child could reach them. "Mr. Cole is in the library. He will speak with you first." Maggie followed her through the house. They passed armed men who pretended not to stare. They passed a sitting room where a young woman sat on a sofa crying into a towel wrapped around her hand. Maggie caught one glimpse of blood spotted through the white cotton before Mrs. Leland gently pulled the door closed. Her steps slowed. Mrs. Leland noticed. "You may still leave." Maggie looked toward the distant sound of Noah crying. Then she thought of her mother's grave, her apartment ceiling, Travis Pike's text, and the child whose screams sounded like grief trapped in a little body with nowhere to go. "No, ma'am," she said. "I can't." Mrs. Leland's face softened for the first time. "Then God help you, child." The library doors stood at the end of the hall, tall, dark, and polished, until Maggie could see a warped reflection of herself in the wood. Mrs. Leland knocked once, then opened them. Gideon Cole stood by the window, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass he had not drunk from. Behind him, rain crawled down the glass in silver lines. He turned when Maggie entered. The room seemed to tighten around him. Maggie had met frightening men before. Travis Pike was frightening in the way a rat was frightening when cornered. Drunk men at the diner were frightening because they mistook volume for strength. Gideon Cole was different. He did not need to perform danger. It sat quietly in him. His eyes moved over her face, her wet dress, her tired posture, the place where her purse strap had left a mark on her shoulder. Maggie felt the weight of his judgment and forced herself not to shrink. "Mrs. Bellamy sent you," he said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir." Maggie Carter. His gaze stayed on her. "You have experience with violent children." Maggie almost said no. Instead, she said, "I have experience with hurting people." One eyebrow lifted slightly. That is not the same thing. No, sir. But sometimes it lives in the same house. For the first time, something like interest crossed his face. It vanished quickly. My son is 3. He does not respond to normal discipline. He throws objects. He bites. He runs. He screams until he vomits. He has injured 5 caregivers in 6 weeks. Maggie listened without interrupting. Gideon set the glass down. He requires constant attention, fast reflexes, and physical control when he becomes dangerous. Mrs. Bellamy was instructed to send someone resilient. The word hung there. Resilient. His eyes lowered briefly to her body, not with hunger, not with kindness, but with doubt. Maggie had heard prettier insults. She had also heard worse. "You don't believe that's me," she said. Gideon's expression did not change. "I believe the agency is desperate for my money." Heat rose into Maggie's face. For one second, shame tried to fold her inward the way it had done in clothing stores, job interviews, bus seats, and doctor's offices where every problem somehow became her weight before it became anything else. Then anger steadied her. "Mr. Cole, I walked half a mile in the rain to get here because I need this job. I've worked on my feet since I was 16. I have cleaned kitchens after men twice my size wrecked them. I have lifted laundry bags until my hands split. I sat beside my mother while cancer took her one breath at a time, and I did not leave because it got ugly." Gideon said nothing. Maggie's voice trembled, but she kept going. "I may not look like what you ordered, but I do not break easy." Outside the library, small feet slapped against marble. A woman shouted, panicked. "Noah, no!" Gideon turned. The doors burst open. Noah Cole ran into the library with Evelyn's blue scarf dragging from one fist and a heavy wooden airplane clutched in the other. His face was red, his eyes were wet and wild, his little chest heaved as if he had been running from fire. Behind him, Mrs. Leland reached the doorway breathless. "Mr. Cole, I tried to stop him." Noah saw Maggie, a stranger in his father's library, another adult standing too tall, another person who might grab him, force him, leave him, fear him. His small hand lifted. Gideon moved fast. Noah. The warning came too late. The wooden airplane flew across the room. Maggie saw it coming and had just enough time to turn her shoulder before it struck her with a hard, cracking thud. Pain flashed bright and immediate. She stumbled backward, hand flying to the place it hit. The room froze. Gideon's face went dark. Silas appeared in the doorway, one hand already inside his jacket. Mrs. Leland covered her mouth. Noah stood panting in the center of the room, waiting for the explosion he knew would come. Maggie took one breath, then another. Her shoulder throbbed, her eyes burned. Slowly, with every person in that cold mansion watching her, she lowered herself to the floor. Maggie lowered herself to the floor slowly, not because she wanted to look brave, but because her knees needed time to obey her. The pain in her shoulder pulsed sharp and hot. The wooden airplane lay near the leg of Gideon's desk, one wing cracked from the impact. Noah stood several feet away with Evelyn's blue scarf crushed in his fist, his little mouth open, his breathing ragged. He looked ready for shouting, ready for grabbing hands, ready for the hard faces adults wore when they were done pretending to be patient. Maggie did not give him any of that. She sat on the expensive rug, one hand pressed to her shoulder, the other resting open on her knee. "Well," she said softly, her voice still uneven from the pain, "that airplane sure knows how to land rough." Noah blinked. Gideon took one step forward. Maggie lifted 2 fingers slightly without looking at him. Not yet. The gesture was small, almost foolish, but Gideon stopped. No one in that house told Gideon Cole to wait, not with words. Certainly not with 2 flower-soft fingers from a woman who had been standing in his library less than 10 minutes. Yet something in the steadiness of her posture held him where he was. Noah's lower lip trembled. "Go away," he cried. "I can," Maggie said, "but I'm sitting right now and getting back up is going to take me a minute." Noah stared at her, confused by the honesty. Maggie drew a careful breath. Are you mad at me, baby? No, baby. All right. Are you mad at me? Noah. His eyes narrowed at his name as if hearing it from her mouth made him more real than he wanted to be. No. Are you mad at the airplane? He looked toward the toy. No. Maggie nodded like the answer made perfect sense. Then that mad must belong to something bigger. The library remained silent except for rain sliding down the windows and Noah's rough breathing. Maggie tapped her chest with 2 fingers. When I get that kind of mad, it feels like something hot got stuck right here. Like it wants out, but it doesn't know the door. Noah pressed Evelyn's scarf harder against his face. Hot, he whispered. Gideon's face changed. It was not much. A tightening around the eyes, a break in the line of his mouth. But Maggie saw it. She stayed with Noah. Yeah, she said. I thought so. The boy's shoulders shook once. Mrs. Leland made a tiny sound in the doorway. Silas looked at her and she swallowed it. Maggie opened her arms a little, not wide enough to demand, just enough to offer. You don't have to come here, she said. But if that hot feeling gets too big, I've got room. Noah did not move. His eyes searched her face with heartbreaking suspicion. He was 3 years old, but grief had taught him the old habit of doubt. Maggie kept still while the blood beat in her shoulder and her legs began to ache from sitting folded beneath her. Then Noah took 1 step. The guards shifted. Gideon's hand rose. The room obeyed. Noah took another step, dragging the blue scarf across the rug behind him. When he reached Maggie, he stopped so close she could see the tear tracks shining on his cheeks. He lifted 1 small hand and touched the sore place on her shoulder. Maggie fought not to wince. Hurt, he asked. A little. His face crumpled. Maggie softened her voice. But I'm okay. The scarf fell from his fingers. Then Noah broke. He fell into her chest with a sob so deep it seemed to have traveled from somewhere far older than his small body. Maggie caught him at once. Her arms wrapped around him gently, fully warmly enclosing him without trapping him. She rocked back a little, steadying his weight, and began to hum. It was not a lullaby anyone in that mansion knew. It was a tune her mother used to hum while rolling pie dough in a hot kitchen, a little uneven, a little church-like, soft enough to lay a hurting heart down inside it. Noah cried harder, not angry crying, not the wild screaming that had filled the halls for months. This was grief finding a mouth. Maggie held him and let the sound come. Gideon watched from beside the desk, his face emptied of every expression he knew how to use. The cane in his hand looked suddenly useless. The suit, the money, the guards, the fortress, the fear, all of it stood around him like furniture in a room where only one thing mattered. His son was crying in the arms of a stranger. And for the first time in almost a year, Noah did not look alone. After several minutes, Noah's sobs thinned into hiccups. His body softened against Maggie's. 1 small fist clung to the front of her wet dress. His cheek rested near her collarbone. Maggie brushed his curls back from his damp forehead. There you go, she whispered. Storm's passing. Noah lifted his head. His dark eyes, so much like Gideon's, studied her face. Maggie smiled at him, tired and tender, with rain still caught in her hair and pain still bright in her shoulder. Noah reached up, pressed both palms to her cheeks, and kissed the tip of her nose. It was quick, wet, clumsy. The kind of kiss only a child gives when words are too far away. Then he tucked his head under her chin and closed his eyes. The mansion seemed to forget itself. Gideon stared at Maggie as if she had reached into fire and brought back something he thought was ash. Finally, he spoke. Mrs. Leland. The housekeeper straightened. Yes, sir. Have the east room prepared. Maggie looked up. Mr. Cole. His eyes did not leave Noah. You will stay here." "I haven't agreed to that." That pulled his gaze to her. For the first time since he entered the room, something almost human moved behind the coldness. "No, I came for a job interview. You just ended it." Maggie shifted Noah more carefully against her. "I still need to know what the job is." Gideon looked at his sleeping son, then at her bruised shoulder. "The job is whatever keeps him breathing like that." Maggie did not know what to say to that. Silas stepped farther into the room. "Should I call Bellamy?" Gideon's voice went flat again, but not cold toward Maggie. Cold toward the world beyond her. "Pay her fee. Double it. Cancel the others." Maggie swallowed. Others. There were more interviews. A strange laugh almost escaped her, but she held it back. She looked down at Noah. He shouldn't have to audition his pain for strangers all day. Gideon said nothing. Because she was right. And because nobody in his house had ever said it that way. Mrs. Leland moved forward with a blanket, but Noah stirred the second she came too close. Maggie shook her head gently. "I'll carry him." Gideon looked at her body again, but this time the doubt was tangled with something else. "He is heavy when he sleeps." Maggie gave him a tired look. "So am I, and I've been carrying myself all day." For one brief second, Silas Boone looked down at the rug like he might be hiding a smile. Gideon did not smile, but his eyes warmed by the smallest degree. Maggie tried to stand with Noah in her arms. The first attempt failed. Pain bit through her shoulder. Her knees complained. Her cheeks flushed hot with embarrassment. Before she could try again, Gideon moved. He did not snatch Noah from her. He did not crowd her. He simply crouched beside her, offering one hand palm up. Maggie looked at it. The hand was large, scarred across the knuckles, clean now, but made for violence. She had seen enough men like Travis Pike to know danger when it came wrapped in charm. But Gideon did not offer charm. He offered steadiness. She took his hand. He helped her rise with surprising care. Noah whimpered but did not wake. Gideon's fingers remained around Maggie's for half a second longer than needed. Then he released her. The nursery was at the end of the east wing, where the air smelled faintly of lavender, old polish, and tears. Maggie carried Noah inside and saw the wreckage from earlier. Books on the floor, a torn curtain, a lamp turned sideways. Evelyn's photograph had been replaced on the dresser, cracked glass and all. Maggie noticed it. Gideon noticed her noticing. "That can be removed," he said. "No," Maggie answered. His jaw tightened. "It upsets him. Maybe because everyone keeps putting it away like missing her is the problem." Gideon went still. Mrs. Leland froze at the doorway. Maggie suddenly remembered whose house she was in. She lowered her voice but not her eyes. "I'm sorry. I spoke too freely." Gideon looked at the photograph. Evelyn smiled from behind broken glass. "No," he said, after a long moment. "You spoke clearly." Maggie laid Noah in the crib, but his fist tightened in her dress. She waited. She did not pull away. She hummed until his fingers loosened one by one. Then she placed Evelyn's scarf beside his cheek. Noah sighed into sleep. When Maggie turned, Gideon was watching his son with a grief so naked it made her look away. "Has he said her name?" she asked softly. Gideon's voice came rough. "Not since the funeral." Maggie nodded. "Then don't rush him, but don't bury her twice either." He looked at her. The air between them held too much. Silas cleared his throat from the hall. "Room is ready." Mrs. Leland led Maggie to the east room, though calling it a room felt dishonest. It was nearly the size of Maggie's whole apartment, with pale walls, a bed dressed in white cotton, a wardrobe, a writing desk, and windows overlooking the wet garden. Someone had placed fresh towels in the bathroom. There was soap wrapped in paper, a robe folded over a chair, and a vase of white flowers on the nightstand. Maggie stood in the doorway, afraid to step in. Mrs. Leland watched her quietly. "It's yours while you're here. I don't need all this. No one asked what you need. Mr. Cole gives what he decides." Maggie stepped inside slowly. The carpet swallowed the sound of her shoes. Mrs. Leland set a small tray on the desk. "Soup, bread, tea. You should eat." "Thank you." The older woman paused at the door. "You did something tonight I have prayed to see." Maggie looked down at her hands. "I didn't do much." Mrs. Leland's face softened. "In this house, gentleness is much." She left before Maggie could answer. Alone, Maggie sat on the edge of the bed. It sank beneath her with impossible softness. She stood again, immediately startled by it, and then laughed once under her breath. The laugh became a sob before she could stop it. She pressed a hand over her mouth. Her shoulder hurt. Her feet throbbed. Her dress was still damp. Her purse sat on the chair with her poor life inside it, looking embarrassed among the expensive furniture. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out. Travis Pike. Missed call. Then a text. "You hiding from me now?" Maggie's stomach tightened. She turned the phone off and set it face down in the drawer of the nightstand, as if wood could keep fear quiet. It could not. But down the hall, Noah whimpered once in his sleep. Maggie forgot Travis. She opened her door and listened. The house seemed to hold its breath with her. The next morning came pale and damp sunlight struggling through the clouds. Maggie woke before the house stirred. For a moment she did not know where she was. Then she saw the white ceiling, the heavy curtains, the vase of flowers, and remembered. She found a clean dress folded over the chair, navy cotton, simple, soft, and in her size, her actual size, not close, not guessed small, not something she would have to pull and stretch and apologize inside. She touched the fabric with 2 fingers. Mrs. Leland appeared in the doorway with a knock. "Mr. Cole had Silas send someone to purchase a few necessities." Maggie turned embarrassed. He didn't have to. No, he rarely has to. Maggie dressed and went to the kitchen where the staff moved with quiet precision. The kitchen was enormous, all marble counters, copper pots, steel appliances, and cold morning light. Noah sat in a high chair near the breakfast nook, refusing to look at a bowl of oatmeal. Gideon stood nearby with coffee in his hand. He looked as if he had not slept. Noah saw Maggie and reached for her. Maggie. Her name in his little voice stopped everyone. Mrs. Leland turned sharply. Silas, standing near the service door, looked up. Gideon's hand tightened around his cup. Maggie smiled as if her chest had not cracked open. "Morning, little man." Noah pointed at the oatmeal. "No." "Fair enough." Gideon said, "He has to eat." Maggie walked to the table. "He probably will. He has refused for 40 minutes. Well, oatmeal does look suspicious when it sits that long." Gideon stared at her. Maggie picked up the spoon, then stopped. "May I—" It took Gideon a second to understand she was asking permission to handle his child's breakfast, not his empire. He nodded. Maggie pulled a chair close and sat. She did not put the spoon near Noah's mouth. Instead, she looked into the bowl with grave concern. "Oh dear," Noah frowned. "What, I think there's a swamp in here." Noah leaned forward despite himself. Maggie dipped the spoon and lifted a slow mound of oatmeal. "And something is rising out of it." Noah's lips parted. Maggie made her fingers into a clumsy alligator and snapped them gently at the spoon. The oatmeal alligator took a bite and immediately made a terrible face. Maggie gasped. "He says it needs cinnamon." Noah stared. Then barely, he smiled. The kitchen went still. Maggie sprinkled cinnamon from a little jar Mrs. Leland handed her without being asked. "Try now," Maggie asked the invisible alligator. She took a tiny taste and nodded seriously. "Much better." Noah reached for the spoon. Maggie gave it to him. He ate 1 bite. Gideon turned his face away, but not before Maggie saw the emotion pass over it like sunlight behind storm clouds. Noah ate 6 bites before losing interest. To anyone else, 6 bites was nothing. In that kitchen, it felt like bells ringing. Later, Maggie found Gideon in the hallway outside the nursery. He stood looking in while Noah stacked blocks on the rug. Every time a block fell, Noah flinched. Every time he did not scream, Maggie praised him gently. "Fell down," Noah said. "Blocks do that," Maggie answered. "We can build again." Gideon's voice came from behind her. "You make everything sound simple." Maggie glanced back. "It isn't. You said it like it is. Because he's little. Little children borrow calm from grown people. If all we hand him is fear, he spends it." Gideon looked into the nursery. "He hurt you. He was hurting. That does not excuse it." "No, but it explains where to start." His eyes moved to her shoulder. "Did you have it checked?" "It'll bruise." "I can have a doctor come. I've had worse from a laundry cart." He did not like that answer. Maggie could see it in the hard set of his mouth. "You say things like, 'Suffering is proof you require less care.'" The words landed too close. She looked away. "And you say things like care is something you can order into a room." For a moment, silence sharpened between them. Then Noah called from inside. "Maggie, look." She went to him. Gideon stayed in the doorway. Noah had built a crooked tower of blocks. It leaned dangerously to one side. Big Noah said, "Very big." The top block slipped. Noah's hands clenched. His breath hitched. Gideon stepped forward automatically. Maggie shook her head once. The block fell. Noah's face tightened. A cry started in his chest. Maggie placed her hand flat on the rug. "Uh-oh." Tower fell. Noah's eyes filled. "Bad. Not bad. Fallen. Bad," he insisted, voice rising. Maggie picked up one block and set it on another. "Fallen means we build again." Noah stared at the 2 blocks. His little hands trembled. Then he picked up a third and placed it on top. It stayed. Maggie smiled. "There it is." Gideon watched as if the small tower were a miracle and a punishment. A miracle because his son had not screamed. A punishment because a stranger knew how to stand beside Noah's broken pieces better than he did. That evening, after Noah had eaten half a biscuit and fallen asleep without biting anyone, Maggie walked into the kitchen and found Gideon sitting alone at the table. No guards, no whiskey. Just him. His jacket removed, sleeves rolled to the forearm, looking less like a king and more like a tired man in a house too large for his grief. She stopped at the doorway. "I can come back." "No." The word was quiet. She stepped inside. A plate sat across from him. Mrs. Leland had left food there for her. Maggie hesitated. "Sit," Gideon said. She almost reminded him that she was staff, but her feet hurt and the chair was there, and something in his voice sounded less like command than invitation. She sat. For a while they ate in silence. Then Gideon said, "My wife used to sing to him." Maggie looked up. He stared at his untouched plate. Badly. She had no ear for music. But he loved it. Maggie did not rush to fill the quiet. Gideon's thumb moved against the edge of his glass. She wanted this house loud. Children, dogs, piano lessons, birthday parties. I told her she was trying to turn a fortress into a carnival. His mouth tightened. She said that was exactly the point. Maggie's chest ached. "She sounds wonderful." She was. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen windows. Gideon looked at Maggie then, and the hard mask was back, though thinner than before. "You told me not to bury her twice. I shouldn't have said it like that." "Yes, you should have." Maggie lowered her eyes. "Sometimes when people die, everybody tries to make the house quiet so the grief behaves. But grief doesn't behave, especially not in children." Gideon leaned back. "And how do you know so much about grief in children?" Maggie's fork stilled. My mama cleaned houses when I was young. I used to go with her when school was out. Rich houses, poor houses, sick houses, houses where people smiled in the front room and cried in the kitchen. She swallowed. And later, when she got sick, I learned people don't always need the right words. Sometimes they need someone who doesn't run when the ugly part shows. Gideon watched her for a long moment. You are not what I expected. No, sir. I think we covered that. A faint smile touched his mouth and disappeared before it could become too much. Maggie. Yes. In this house, when it concerns my son, speak freely. She met his eyes. That may not always be comfortable for you. I did not ask for comfort. No, she said softly. I don't suppose you know how. The words should have angered him. Instead, he looked toward the dark window where their reflections sat side by side in the glass. From somewhere upstairs, Noah murmured in his sleep. Both of them heard it. Both of them rose at the same time. For a second, they stood too close beside the table, his arm almost brushing hers, the air suddenly warm in a way that had nothing to do with the kitchen. Then Noah called again, small and frightened. Maggie. She moved first. Gideon followed. In the nursery, Noah stood in his crib, clutching the blue scarf. Boom, he whispered. Gideon stopped at the doorway. Maggie went to the crib, but she did not pick Noah up immediately. No boom, she said. Just rain. Noah looked past her at his father. His face crumpled. Daddy Gideon went very still. Maggie turned slightly. He asked for you. Gideon crossed the room like a man approaching a wild animal or a memory or a wound. He stopped beside the crib. Noah reached one hand through the bars. Not all the way. Just enough. Gideon looked at that hand as if it were the most dangerous offering he had ever received. Then he took it gently between two fingers. Noah did not pull away. Maggie stood beside them quiet as the rain holding the space open while father and son found each other in the dark. For a while, the house learned how to breathe again. It did not happen all at once. Nothing broken in the Cole mansion healed that quickly. The marble halls still carried echoes. Guards still stood near doors with their hands too close to their jackets. Gideon still left before sunrise some mornings and returned after midnight with river fog on his coat and silence in his eyes. But something had changed. It began in small ways. Noah stopped throwing his cup every morning. Not every morning, but enough that Mrs. Leland noticed and cried quietly into a dish towel when no one was looking. The nursery curtains stayed untorn for 3 days in a row, then 4, then a full week. The blue scarf still slept beside his cheek, but he no longer screamed when someone touched it to wash it. Maggie washed it by hand in the bathroom sink using lavender soap and warm water, then laid it across the back of a chair to dry in the sun. Noah watched her the whole time. "Mama's smell gone?" he asked. Maggie wrung the water gently from the fabric. "Not gone," she said. "Just soft again." He considered that with serious eyes. Soft again. That's right. He touched the damp scarf with one finger, then looked up at her. "You soft." Maggie smiled before she could stop herself. "I try to be." At breakfast, the great dining room was still too formal for a 3-year-old, so Maggie moved Noah into the kitchen nook. Gideon objected the first morning. "He eats in the dining room." Maggie set a plate of scrambled eggs on the small table by the window. "Does he eat there, or does food sit there while everybody gets tense?" Gideon stood in the kitchen doorway dressed for the dock's cufflinks flashing. Mrs. Leland suddenly became very interested in the coffee pot. Noah sat in the chair Maggie had chosen for him, bare feet swinging. He held a small wooden horse in one hand and a piece of toast in the other. Gideon looked at his son. Noah took a bite. That ended the argument. The kitchen became Noah's kingdom. The wooden horse sat beside his plate. A stuffed rabbit judged his oatmeal. A plastic dinosaur guarded the fruit bowl. Maggie made rules, but she made them warm. Noah could choose the blue cup or the green cup, but milk had to go in one of them. He could sit on the chair or on Maggie's lap, but breakfast did not happen under the table. He could be mad, but he could not hit. When he forgot, Maggie caught his wrist gently. No hurting hands. Noah's face twisted. Mad hands. I see that. Throw. Hands want to throw. But hands can squeeze. She placed a folded kitchen towel in his grip. Squeeze hard. Noah squeezed until his cheeks went red. Then he breathed. Maggie breathed with him. Across the room, Gideon watched like a man studying a language he had once believed beneath him. One afternoon, thunder rolled over Savannah. The sound cracked above the house, deep and sudden. Noah froze in the middle of the playroom. Blocks stood around him in a crooked city. His fingers opened. One block fell. His eyes widened. Boom! Maggie was on the floor with him sorting wooden animals into a basket. She did not move fast. She had learned that speed could look like danger. That was thunder. Noah shook his head. Boom! Thunder makes a boom sound. The house is safe. His breathing quickened. Gideon appeared in the doorway, drawn by the change in the air more than the sound itself. Noah saw him and began to cry. Not scream. Cry. Daddy. Boom! The words hit Gideon in the chest. Maggie saw it. She saw the way his face lost color, the way his hand tightened around the doorframe. He could have retreated behind command. He could have called for Mrs. Leland. He could have let Maggie handle what she had somehow become good at handling. Instead, he stepped into the room. Maggie kept her voice low. Show him your hands. Gideon looked at her. Open hands, she said. He lowered himself to one knee and held his hands out where Noah could see them. Noah, Gideon said, his voice rougher than usual. It is thunder, not the car. You are in the playroom. Maggie is here. I am here. Another roll of thunder shook the windows. Noah cried harder, but he did not run. He looked from Maggie to Gideon, torn between terror and wanting. Maggie began humming her mother's tune. Gideon looked at her uncertain. Hum with me, she whispered. I do not hum. Today you do. For a moment he looked almost offended. Then his mouth opened and a low sound came out. It was not pretty. It was barely the same tune. It rumbled like gravel under a slow truck. Noah stared at him. The fear did not vanish, but curiosity moved into the same space. Gideon kept humming. Badly. Maggie had to press her lips together to keep from smiling. Noah crawled into his father's lap and buried his face against his shirt. Gideon went very still. His hands hovered in the air, afraid to settle, afraid to do the wrong thing. Maggie gave him a small nod. He placed one hand on Noah's back. The boy did not pull away. A strange quiet filled the room deeper than silence. Rain whispered against the windows. Thunder moved farther off over the trees. Gideon sat on the carpet in a $3,000 suit while his son trembled in his lap and Maggie hummed beside them. When Noah finally slept, Gideon did not move for a long time. Maggie sat back on her heels. Your leg is probably asleep. Yes, you can shift him. No, she smiled gently. You can breathe too. His eyes lifted to hers. I forgot. That answer stayed between them. Later that evening, Maggie found him in the kitchen. He stood at the sink with his sleeves rolled up, washing his own hands like he was trying to remove a day that had gone deeper than skin. The house was quiet. Noah slept upstairs. Mrs. Leland had gone to her room. The guards changed shifts outside with soft footsteps and murmured codes. Maggie entered carrying a tray of cooling peach biscuits. Gideon looked over his shoulder. You are always baking. You are always brooding. We all need hobbies. The corner of his mouth moved. She set the tray on the counter and began brushing melted butter over the tops. The kitchen filled with the smell of Peach's cinnamon and warm dough. Gideon dried his hands and watched her. You feed everyone, he said. They eat. My men are not stray cats. Could have fooled me. Silas took 3 biscuits yesterday and looked guilty about it. He does not feel guilt. Then maybe it was indigestion. This time Gideon actually smiled. Not much. Not enough for the world to notice. But Maggie noticed, and the sight did something foolish to her heart. She turned back to the biscuits too quickly. His gaze stayed on her. The custom dresses had arrived 2 days earlier. Maggie had tried to refuse them, then tried to hide from them, then finally worn one because Mrs. Leland looked so pleased that saying no felt unkind. Tonight she wore a soft cream cotton dress with little blue flowers. It fit her body without punishing it. No tight pulling of the hips, no buttons straining across her chest, no need to hold her breath when she sat down. Gideon noticed that too. Maggie felt the heat of it before she saw his eyes. She cleared her throat. Do you need something, Mr. Cole, Gideon? Her hand stilled on the pastry brush. Pardon. My name is Gideon. I know your name. You do not use it. That seems wise. He stepped closer, slowly enough that she could move away if she wanted. Are you afraid of me, Maggie? She considered lying. Then she looked at the faint scar across his knuckles, the expensive watch at his wrist, the darkness that followed him even into warm rooms. Yes. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes did. Good. Her brows drew together. That's not exactly comforting. It means you are not careless. She set the brush down. I am afraid of what you can do. I am not afraid to tell you the truth. No, he said quietly. You are not. The air tightened. Outside, rain slid from the eaves. Somewhere far off, a guard laughed under his breath and was hushed by another. Gideon reached toward her face. Maggie froze. His fingers stopped an inch from her cheek. Flower, he said. She should have stepped back. She did not. He brushed a white streak from the curve of her cheek with his thumb. The touch was gentle, almost careful, and that made it more dangerous than roughness could have been. Maggie's breath caught. Gideon heard it. His eyes lowered to her mouth. For one suspended second, the kitchen seemed to shrink around them. The marble counters, copper pots, warm biscuits, rain, dark windows, all of it faded behind the space between his hand and her skin. Maggie stepped back. I work for you. His hand lowered. Yes. And you are Noah's father. Yes. And this house is full of men with guns. That is also true. She gave him a look that should have ended the conversation. Instead, he leaned one hip against the counter. You make a strong case. I am serious. So am I. Her pulse moved too fast. Then be serious enough not to ruin the one peaceful thing your son has. That struck him. The warmth in his eyes dimmed, not with anger but with understanding. Maggie hated that it hurt to see him pull back. He nodded once. Good night, Maggie. She watched him leave the kitchen, his shadow long against the hallway floor. When he was gone, she gripped the edge of the counter and let out a breath she had been holding too long. The next morning, Gideon arranged for Maggie to visit her mother's grave. She nearly refused. I do not need an escort to see my mama. Yes, Gideon said, reading a document at the breakfast table. You do. Maggie stood across from him with her arms folded. I went places before I met you, and now dangerous people know you live in my house. I am not one of your shipments. His eyes lifted. No, you are under my roof. That sounds a lot like property. The room cooled. Silas, standing by the door, looked at the wall with intense devotion. Gideon set the document down. It means protected. Maggie's voice softened, though her pride still held its ground. I have been taking care of myself a long time. I know. That surprised her. He stood. That is why you do not know when to stop. She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that stopping was a luxury for women with savings accounts and brothers nearby, and cars that started every morning. But the thought of her mother's grave rose in her chest, and she had not been there in weeks. Silas drove her in a black SUV with tinted windows. The cemetery sat outside the city where the road narrowed and magnolia trees leaned over the iron fence. Rain had left the grass dark and shining. The air smelled of wet earth and cut flowers. Maggie carried a small bundle of wildflowers wrapped in paper from the mansion kitchen. Silas parked near the path. "I will wait here. Thank you." He looked toward the rows of stones. "You have 10 minutes alone. Then I come looking." Maggie almost smiled. "That is your version of kindness, is it?" "Yes, ma'am." She walked to her mother's grave with the flowers pressed against her chest. Lorraine Carter's headstone was modest pale gray, still too new. Maggie knelt carefully in the grass, ignoring the damp soaking through her dress. She cleared away a few leaves and placed the flowers near the name. "Hi, Mama." Her voice broke on the second word. She pressed her fingers to the carved letters. "I got a good job. Strange job. Rich people strange, not regular strange." A wet laugh slipped out. "There's a little boy there. Noah. He misses his mama so bad he does not know where to put it. I think you would like him." The wind moved softly through the magnolia leaves. Maggie wiped her cheek. "And his father is trouble. Handsome trouble, which is worse because handsome trouble always thinks it can explain itself." She looked down, ashamed of the smile that came with his name. "I am trying to be smart," a voice behind her answered. "You never were too good at that, sweetheart." Maggie's blood went cold. She stood too fast and nearly slipped in the wet grass. Travis Pike stepped from behind a tree with 2 men at his back. He wore a cheap brown suit and a gold chain over a black shirt, his hair slicked down his smile, thin and mean. A cigarette hung unlit from his mouth. Maggie looked toward the SUV. Too far. The trees blocked Silas's view. "Travis." He spread his arms. "That all I get. No hug, I have your money. I bet you do. I can pay half today, the rest next week." He laughed softly. "Listen to you. Next week. That big house got you talking like a woman with a future." Maggie kept her hands still, though every instinct told her to run. "I am trying to settle my debt." Travis walked closer. "I am not here for your little payments." One of his men moved behind her. Maggie felt him without turning. "What do you want?" Travis reached out and gripped her wrist. Hard. Pain shot up her arm. "The Darrow crew wants something from that house." Maggie tried to pull free. "Let go. Gate codes, guard rotations, camera positions, anything your soft self can get close enough to see." "No." His smile vanished. "No, no." Travis leaned in. His breath smelled like tobacco and bitter coffee. "You forgetting who paid for your mama's medicine?" Maggie's eyes burned. "You gave me a loan. I gave you time. I can take that back." I said no. His fingers tightened until she gasped. "You think Gideon Cole cares about you? You think a man like that sees you at all? You are a warm body in his kitchen and a soft lap for his kid. That is it." The words struck places Maggie had tried to hide from the world. Travis saw it and smiled. "You know I am right." Maggie lifted her chin, though her voice trembled. "You do not know anything about that house. I know the Darrows have been waiting for one crack in Cole's wall, and I know you are it. I will not help you hurt Noah." At the child's name, Travis's eyes sharpened. "There she is, loyal little Maid." He released her wrist only to catch her chin. Maggie jerked away. He pulled a small knife from his sleeve. Not large, not theatrical, just bright enough to make her stop breathing when he pressed it lightly against her side. "Friday night," he said. "Old rice mill by the marsh. You bring me something useful or I give the Darrows the boys' schedule." Maggie shook her head. Please. There is that word. His voice dropped. I know where the child plays. I know when the old housekeeper takes tea. I know Cole leaves before dawn twice a week. You are not the only one who can watch a house. Terror opened under her ribs. Travis stepped back and slid the knife away. Friday. He walked off between the stones, his men following. Maggie stood frozen until her legs nearly gave out. By the time Silas reached her, Travis was gone. Silas's eyes went at once to her face, then her wrist. What happened? Maggie pulled her sleeve down. Nothing. His expression hardened. Miss Carter. I said nothing. Silas looked toward the trees. Maggie forced herself to breathe. If you tell him I got upset at my mother's grave, I will deny it. Silas studied her for a long moment. Then quietly he said, You are a bad liar. Maggie walked past him toward the SUV. Then do not ask me questions. The ride back felt longer. Savannah slid by in gray and green outside the tinted window, but Maggie saw none of it. Travis's words kept moving through her head. You are the crack. You are the crack. At the mansion, Noah ran to her the moment she entered the kitchen. Maggie. She bent and caught him too tightly. He squirmed. Too much. She loosened her arms at once. Sorry, baby. Noah touched her cheek. Sad Maggie smiled the way adults smile when they are trying not to fall apart. Just tired. From the hallway, Gideon watched. He saw the smile. He saw the sleeve pulled low over her wrist. He saw Silas come in behind her with a face like locked steel. He said nothing then, but his eyes followed Maggie for the rest of the day. That evening, the biscuits burned. Maggie had never burned biscuits in her life. Mrs. Leland found her standing in front of the oven, staring at the blackened pan as smoke curled into the air. Oh, child, Maggie blinked. I forgot. Mrs. Leland took the pan from her hands. Sit down. I am fine. No, you are standing in my kitchen looking like a ghost, and I am too old to entertain lies before supper. Maggie sat because her knees had started shaking. From upstairs came Noah's laugh as Gideon read to him in a slow, uncertain voice. He was getting better. Not good, but better. He no longer read every story like a legal contract. The sound broke Maggie open. She had brought danger to that laugh. She had become the door Travis wanted to walk through. For the next 2 days, she moved through the house as if carrying glass inside her chest. She checked windows twice. She startled when guards spoke. She stopped baking unless Noah asked. She barely ate. At night, she sat beside his bed long after he fell asleep, watching the rise and fall of his small body. On Thursday night, Gideon found her there. The nursery was dark except for the moonlight on the floor. Noah slept with the blue scarf tucked under his chin. Maggie sat in the rocking chair, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Gideon stood in the doorway. You are avoiding me. Maggie did not turn. I am working. You stopped singing. No answer. You stopped correcting me. Still no answer. That concerns me most. Her mouth trembled, but she forced it still. I am tired. Gideon entered and closed the door softly behind him. The click sounded too loud. Maggie stood. I should go. He crossed the room before she could pass, not touching her, only blocking the lie with his presence. His gaze lowered to her wrist. Show me. There is nothing to show. Maggie. Her name in his voice was not a command this time. It was worse. It was concern. She looked away. He reached for her hand slowly. She could have pulled back. She did not. Gideon turned her wrist into the moonlight. The bruises had darkened into the shape of fingers. The room went very still. When he spoke, his voice was almost gentle. Who did this to you? Maggie's throat closed. Noah shifted in his sleep. She looked at the child, then back at the man who could turn cities silent with one phone call. Fear and loyalty pulled at her from opposite sides until something inside her gave way. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I need you not to be angry in this room," she whispered. Gideon looked at the bruises again. His face became calm in a way that frightened her more than rage. "All right," he said. Maggie covered her mouth with her free hand, but the truth was already rising, and once it started, she could not hold it back. Maggie told him about Travis Pike in a voice that kept breaking around the edges. She told him about the hospital bills, about sitting beside her mother, while the machines breathed with that soft plastic sigh, about the funeral director who would not lower Lorraine Carter into the ground until the balance was paid. She told him how Travis had appeared outside the hospital with his cheap sympathy and his open wallet, how she had known better and taken the money anyway because knowing better did not buy morphine. Gideon stood in the moonlit nursery and listened. He did not interrupt. He did not pace. He did not curse. That frightened her more than shouting would have. Noah slept a few feet away with Evelyn's scarf tucked under his chin. His little mouth parted, one hand curled beside his cheek. Every time Maggie's voice rose, she looked toward him and lowered it again. She could face Gideon Cole's anger, maybe. She could not wake that child into another storm. At last, she told him about the cemetery. Travis stepping from behind the magnolia tree, his hand around her wrist, his knife against her side. The Darrow crew, the old rice mill, Friday night. The demand for gate codes guard rotations, camera blind spots, anything that could turn Gideon's fortress into a map for enemies. When she reached the part about Noah's schedule, her voice vanished. Gideon's eyes lifted from her bruised wrist to her face. "He threatened my son." Maggie nodded once. Her throat worked, but no sound came. "He used my son to force you." She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. "I told him no." "I know. You do not know." "I do." The certainty in his voice broke something in her. Not because it was kind, because it was undeserved in a way she did not know how to hold. She shook her head. "I thought about running." Gideon said nothing. "I packed half my bag before I came in here tonight. I was going to leave before dawn. I thought if I disappeared, he could not use me to hurt Noah." Gideon's face did not change, but the room seemed to grow colder. "You were going to leave him without saying goodbye." The words hit harder than accusation. Maggie looked at Noah sleeping in the crib. "If he cried, I would not have been able to go." Gideon closed his eyes. For 1 second, the crime king of Savannah looked like nothing but a father who had almost lost the one person his son trusted. Then the mask returned. He turned toward the door. Maggie caught his sleeve without thinking. "Please." He looked down at her hand. She let go at once. "Please do not make this worse because of me." Gideon's voice was quiet. "Maggie, men like Travis Pike do not stop because women pray they will. I know that." "No, you survived him. That is not the same as understanding him." Her eyes flashed. "I understand men who enjoy making women afraid." Something in Gideon's gaze shifted dark and dangerous. "Then understand this. He did not threaten a servant. He did not threaten a debt. He threatened my house." Maggie's lips parted. He stepped closer, but his voice stayed low because Noah slept nearby. "And he touched you." The words filled the space between them. Not loud, not romantic. Something older than either. Maggie swallowed hard. "I am not worth a war." Gideon looked at her as if she had said something in a language he hated. "You do not get to decide your worth by naming what others paid for you." Tears blurred her sight. Gideon. It was the first time she said his name without correcting herself. He heard it. His expression changed for the length of one heartbeat. Then he moved past her and opened the nursery door. Silas stood in the hallway. Of course he did. silent as a shadow hand's folded pale eyes already sharp enough to cut. Gideon did not ask how long he had been there. "Office," he said. Silas nodded. Gideon turned back to Maggie. "Stay with Noah." "No." Both men looked at her. Maggie lifted her chin, though her hands trembled. "I am done being moved around by men deciding where I am safest." Gideon held her gaze. "You are not coming to the mill." "I did not ask to." "Then what are you asking?" "To know what happens because of me." His jaw tightened. "This is not because of you." "That does not answer me." Silas looked between them and wisely chose the wall again. Gideon took a slow breath. "You may come to the office. You will sit. You will listen. You will not argue tactical decisions." Maggie wiped her face. "I make no promises about arguing." For the first time that night, Silas almost blinked like a man suppressing amusement. Gideon's mouth did not smile, but something in his eyes warmed despite the danger. Fine. The office was downstairs, hidden behind a bookcase in a room tourists would have called a study, and criminals knew better than to enter uninvited. Gideon pressed his thumb to a panel beneath the shelf. The lock clicked. The wall opened inward. Maggie stepped inside and stopped. The room behind the bookcase was nothing like the rest of the mansion. No old portraits, no soft rugs, no polished antiques. It was steel glass, dark wood, and screens. A map of Savannah covered one wall. Red and blue pins marked docks, warehouses, highways, churches, restaurants, police precincts, and private properties. Photographs sat in neat rows beneath names Maggie did not know and did not want to know. A long table stood in the center. 4 men were already there. They rose when Gideon entered. Maggie recognized 2 guards from the gate. The others had the same stillness as Silas, the same careful hands and unreadable faces. Not thugs, not loud men. These were men who moved quietly because noise was for amateurs. Gideon took his place at the head of the table. Maggie remained near the door. He glanced at her. "Sit." She almost refused on principle, then realized her knees were weak enough to betray her. She sat in the nearest chair. Silas placed a tablet on the table. An image appeared. Travis Pike outside a liquor store. Then another. Travis talking to a man with a narrow face and slicked hair. Another image. The same man near the old rice mill. Silas tapped the screen. Darrow collector. Name is Wade Keller. Mid-level. Ambitious. Careless. Gideon looked at the photographs. How many 3 confirmed at the mill tonight? Likely 2 watching the road. Travis thinks he is the broker, but Keller is using him as bait. One of the men at the table spoke. If Pike has the girl bring codes, Keller takes them and cuts him out. Maggie flinched at the girl but said nothing. Gideon noticed. "Maggie," he said. The man corrected himself immediately. "Miss Carter," Silas continued. "Darrow wants a breach. Not tonight, probably. They want proof the house can be reached. After that, they plan around the boy." The boy. Maggie's stomach twisted. Gideon was very still. "Phones. We can jam within a quarter mile of the mill. We control the East Road and the Marsh Road. Riverside is soft, then harden it." Silas nodded. Gideon looked at the map. "No uniforms. None. No shots near civilians. There should be no civilians at that hour. Should be is not enough." Silas's gaze sharpened. "I will confirm." Maggie stared at Gideon. This was not the wild violence she had imagined, not men grabbing guns and roaring into the night. This was colder, cleaner, more frightening because it had discipline. Gideon Cole did not lash out. He arranged consequences. He turned to her. "What exactly did Pike ask you to bring my access card? You do not have one. I know. What else? Anything useful?" He said schedules, codes, camera blind spots. Gideon looked at Silas. "Prepare an envelope. Old guard rotation, false dock access. Dead gate code. Silas nodded. Maggie's hands tightened in her lap. You are giving him something. Gideon's gaze returned to her. I am giving him enough rope to show who holds the other end. You are going there. Yes. The words settled like a stone in her chest. Maggie looked down at the table at all the maps and names at the quiet men waiting for orders. She thought of Noah upstairs asleep because for one fragile week the world had become gentle enough for him to close his eyes. What happens to Travis? No one answered. That was answer enough. Maggie looked at Gideon. I do not want blood on my hands. His expression softened in a way that made the other men look away. Then keep your hands clean. This is mine. That is not how guilt works. No, he said, but it is how responsibility does. She searched his face for the monster people whispered about in Savannah. She found him there. She did. It would have been foolish to pretend otherwise. He was in the stillness, in the hard line of his jaw, and the way every man in the room waited for his permission to breathe. But she also found the father who had hummed badly in the storm, the man who had held Noah like a sacred thing, the man who looked at her bruised wrist as if it had been carved into him too. The meeting ended with quiet orders. Men left one by one. Silas remained. Gideon stood over the map, both hands braced on the table. Maggie rose. I should check on Noah. He is safe. I still need to see him. Gideon nodded. She reached the door, then stopped. Gideon. He looked up. The sound of his name in her voice moved through the room more strongly than any order had. Come back careful. Silas looked down at his tablet. Gideon's eyes stayed on Maggie. Careful is not what men expect from me. Then surprise them. For a moment he said nothing. Then he nodded once. I will. Upstairs, Noah slept with one arm wrapped around the blue scarf. Maggie sat beside his crib and listened to the house change shape around her. Footsteps moved below. Car doors closed outside. Engines started low and controlled. No one shouted. No one rushed. The mansion prepared for violence with the quiet grace of a church before a funeral. Mrs. Leland appeared in the nursery doorway wearing a robe over her nightgown. Her silver hair was braided down one shoulder. You told him? Maggie looked up. I had to. Yes. The older woman came inside and stood beside the crib. Noah should not wake alone. I am staying. I know. Mrs. Leland looked at the sleeping child, then at Maggie's face. This house has had many women in it. Beautiful women. Polished women. Women who knew which fork to use and how to smile at men they hated. Most of them left no warmth behind. Maggie did not know what to do with that. Mrs. Leland touched the crib rail. You did. Maggie's throat tightened. I may have brought danger, too. Danger was here before you were born, child. The same words Gideon had nearly said in another form. Maggie looked at Noah. Then why does it feel like my fault? Mrs. Leland sighed softly. Because guilt is easier than helplessness. Noah stirred. Both women went quiet. He settled again. Downstairs, the final car left the drive. The house became still. The old rice mill stood on the edge of the marsh, half swallowed by weeds and weather. Once it had processed grain from fields that no longer belonged to the families who bragged about them. Now its windows were broken, its roof patched with rust, its brick walls dark with rain. The marsh around it breathed mist into the night. Travis Pike stood inside near a rusted conveyor belt, smoking with shaking fingers. He checked his phone again. No signal. He frowned. Wade Keller leaned against a support beam, chewing gum slowly. He wore a black jacket, expensive boots, and the lazy confidence of a man not smart enough to fear the right people. She is late, Travis said. She will come. You do not know that. Keller smiled. People like her always come. Poor folks think if they hand over one thing, the wolf leaves the door. Travis tried to laugh. It came out thin. Two other men stood near the loading bay. One watched the road through a cracked window. The other held a shotgun low against his leg. Rain tapped through holes in the roof. Travis looked at his phone again. Still no service. Keller stopped chewing. What? Nothing. Probably the storm. The man by the window straightened. Headlights. Travis's relief came too fast. See? Told you. But the headlights were not one car. They were many. They appeared through the rain like white eyes. Keller pushed off the beam. That is not her. The lights died all at once. Darkness rushed back in. For half a second, no one moved. Then the mill doors opened. Not exploded, not kicked. Opened because Silas Boone already had someone inside who knew the lock. Men entered from 3 directions. No shouting, no warning, just movement. A hand closed over the shotgun before it could rise. A body hit the floor hard enough to drive dust from the boards. Keller reached for his weapon and found Silas already behind him, pressing the barrel of a pistol low against his ribs. "Drop it," Silas said. Keller dropped it. Travis backed away until he struck the old conveyor belt. No, no, no. Gideon stepped into the mill last. Rain shone on his black coat. His hair was damp. His expression was empty in the way deep water looks empty at night. Travis tried to smile. "Mr. Cole." Gideon walked toward him. Every footstep sounded clear in the hollow room. "This is a misunderstanding," Travis said. "No." The word was soft. Travis's smile died. Gideon stopped a few feet away. "You stood over Lorraine Carter's grave and threatened her daughter." Travis swallowed. "I just wanted my money. You put a knife to her. I did not hurt her." Gideon tilted his head slightly. The small movement made Travis flinch. "You bruised her wrist." Travis glanced around at the men on the floor at Keller, held silent by Silas at the weapons now pointed toward him. "I did not know she mattered to you." The mill went still. Even the rain seemed quieter. Gideon stepped closer. "That is the first honest thing you have said." Travis's eyes widened. "I can fix this. I can give you Darrow names, routes, drop points. I know things." "Yes," Gideon said. "You do." Hope flickered in Travis's face. Gideon looked at Silas. Keller was forced into a chair. His phone wallet and weapon sat on the table in front of him. One of Gideon's men placed a recorder beside them. Gideon turned back to Travis. "You are going to tell me who gave the order to use my son." Travis shook his head quickly. "I do not know his real name." Gideon waited. Just a voice. Calls came through Keller. It was Darrow business. "I swear." Keller spat blood onto the floor from a split lip. "Pike, shut your mouth." Silas struck him once in the stomach. Keller folded forward, gasping. Gideon did not look away from Travis. The name. Travis began talking. At first pieces, then more. Names, locations, burner phones. A warehouse near the state line, a Darrow captain who wanted control of Gideon's river routes before the end of summer. He talked until sweat ran down his temples and his cigarette lay forgotten in a puddle on the floor. Silas recorded everything. When Travis finally stopped, the old mill hummed with rain and fear. Gideon studied him. "Did Maggie ever agree to help you?" "No." "Did she offer information?" "No." "Did she protect my son?" Travis hesitated. Gideon's eyes hardened. "Yes," Travis said quickly. "Yes. She protected him." Gideon looked toward Silas. "Make sure that part is clear." Silas nodded. Travis wiped his mouth with a shaking hand. "So we are done." Gideon turned back to him. "You threatened a child because you believed a woman with no money had no shield. Travis backed up. I was desperate. No. Desperation is what you used when you found Maggie outside a hospital. What you are is small. Travis's face twisted with panic. Mr. Cole, please. Gideon leaned closer. You told her she was disposable. Travis could not speak. Gideon's voice dropped. She is not. Outside, thunder rolled far over the marsh. Gideon stepped back and pulled on black leather gloves. Travis began to cry. Silas looked at Gideon waiting. For a long moment, Maggie's voice seemed to live in the air between them. Come back careful. Gideon looked at the men holding Travis, then at Keller, then at the recorder on the table. He removed the gloves slowly. No bodies tonight. Silas's eyebrows lifted by the smallest degree. Gideon saw it. Do not look so surprised. I would not dream of it. Gideon walked to Keller and crouched in front of him. You will carry a message to Darrow. Keller breathed hard through his nose. Go to hell. Gideon smiled faintly. You first. He picked up Keller's phone from the table and placed it in the man's lap. Your confession is already moving through channels you cannot stop. By sunrise, your people will know you tried to use a grieving child as leverage and failed. They will know Pike talked. They will know every route he named is poisoned. Keller's eyes went sharp with fear. Gideon stood. If Darrow wants my river, he can come to me like a man. If he looks toward my house again, I will take every dock truck warehouse judge and breath he has left. He turned to Travis. As for you, your debt business is over. Your accounts are gone. Your collectors are gone. Every woman who owes you money in this city wakes up free tomorrow. Travis stared at him, stunned. You cannot do that. Gideon's face went cold. I already did. Silas stepped forward and placed a stack of papers on the table. Bank transfers, ledgers, names. Travis's ugly little kingdom gutted in neat columns of ink. Travis looked like a man watching his bones disappear. What am I supposed to do? Gideon walked past him toward the door. Learn what helpless feels like. Silas followed. Behind them, Gideon's men began moving Travis and Keller into separate cars. There were no screams, no gunshots, no bodies left in the rain. Only the old rice mill, the marsh fog, and the quiet destruction of men who had mistaken cruelty for power. When Gideon stepped outside, rain touched his face. Silas came beside him. That was restrained. Gideon looked toward the black line of trees. It was not for them. No. Silas waited. Gideon adjusted his cuffs. It was for the woman sitting beside my son. Silas said nothing for a moment. Then quietly, she will ask what happened. Yes. What will you tell her? Gideon looked toward the waiting car. The truth I can live with. At the mansion, Maggie had not moved from Noah's room. Dawn had begun to pale the windows when the first SUV rolled through the gates. She heard it before she saw it. Tires on wet gravel, a low engine, a door closing downstairs. Her whole body went weak with relief and dread. Noah still slept. Maggie rose carefully and left the nursery door open behind her. She reached the top of the stairs just as Gideon entered the foyer below. His coat was wet. His face was tired. There was no visible blood on him. Somehow that made her want to cry harder. He looked up. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Maggie came down the stairs. She did not run. Pride held her together for the first few steps. Fear broke it by the landing. She crossed the foyer and stopped in front of him. Is Noah safe? Yes. Is it over? Yes. She searched his face. Did you kill him? The question hung in the open space between marble floors and morning light. Gideon did not look away. No. Her breath left her so suddenly she swayed. Gideon caught her by the elbows. I wanted to. I know. I may still regret not doing it. That sounds like you. His hands tightened slightly, then loosened, giving her the choice to step back. She did not. What happened? He gave names. Darrow roots. Proof of the plan. His operation is gone. The people who owed him money will be released from their debts by noon. He will not collect in Savannah again. Maggie stared at him. For a moment she looked younger than her 26 years. Tired, stunned, still soaked in fear she had carried for too long. My mother's debt. Gone. Her face crumpled. Gideon's voice softened. It never should have existed. Maggie covered her mouth. A sob escaped through her fingers. He pulled her into his arms. This time she did not think about rules. She did not think about staff power, money, danger, or the men who might be watching from shadowed hallways. She folded against him and let herself shake. Gideon held her carefully at first, then not carefully enough to feel distant. His arms closed around her like a promise he had no right to make and every intention of keeping. His cheek rested against her hair. Rain smoke and cold night clung to him. Under it was the faint, clean scent of his soap and the something darker that was simply Gideon. I'm sorry, she whispered. His hand moved over her back. No, I brought him here. No, I almost left Noah. But you did not. I was scared. You stayed scared. That is different. She laughed once broken and wet against his coat. That does not sound very brave. It is the only kind of brave that matters. She pulled back just enough to look at him. His eyes were on her face with an intensity that made the foyer disappear. You destroyed a man's life because he hurt me. I destroyed a man's power because he used pain as currency, and because he hurt me. Gideon did not deny it. No one touches you like that again. The words should have frightened her. Maybe they did. But beneath the fear was something else, something warm and terrible and alive. Gideon, she said softly. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then lifted again, asking without words, in a way she had not expected from a man who usually took silence as permission from the world. Maggie rose onto her toes. The first touch of his mouth was not gentle, in the way polite men are gentle. It was controlled, but only barely. He kissed her like a man who had been standing outside warmth for years, and had finally been invited in. Maggie's hands gripped his coat. Her body, which the world had made her doubt and hide and apologize for, fit against him without apology. He made a low sound against her mouth, and she felt it through her ribs. Then a small voice came from the stairs. Maggie. They separated at once. Noah stood on the second step from the bottom, holding the blue scarf in one hand and rubbing one eye with the other. Maggie wiped her face quickly. Morning, little man. Noah looked at Gideon, then at Maggie, then at their hands still joined between them. Storm gone. Maggie looked at Gideon. His thumb brushed over her knuckles once. For now, she said. Noah came down the stairs and lifted his arms. Maggie bent to pick him up, but Gideon stopped her with a quiet touch to her shoulder. Let me. Noah hesitated. Gideon crouched. May I? The question was awkward in his mouth, but real. Noah studied him, sleepy and solemn. Then he stepped forward. Gideon lifted his son into his arms. Noah settled against him, Evelyn's scarf pressed between them. Maggie stood beside them in the morning light while the great cold mansion held the three of them in silence. For the first time, the silence did not feel empty. It felt like a room waiting to be filled. Morning spread slowly through the Cole mansion, touching the marble floor in pale gold, softening the sharp corners of the foyer, catching in Noah's curls as he rested his head against his father's shoulder. Gideon stood very still, as if moving too quickly might break the moment. His arms held Noah with a caution Maggie understood. He was not afraid of the child's anger now. He was afraid of his trust. Noah rubbed his face against Gideon's coat. "Hungry," he murmured. Maggie let out a breath that almost became a laugh. "Of course you are. Big storms always leave a person hungry." Noah lifted his head. "Biscuits. I think that can be arranged." He looked at Gideon. "Daddy too?" The question was small, sleepy, ordinary. It struck Gideon harder than any threat ever had. "Yes," he said. His voice sounded rough from the night and from something older than exhaustion. "Daddy, too." They went to the kitchen together, Mrs. Leland was already there, pretending not to cry, while setting out plates. Silas leaned against the back wall with his arms folded, looking like a man who had spent the night dismantling criminal operations and now found himself emotionally defeated by a 3-year-old asking for breakfast. Noah sat in his chair by the window. Maggie warmed biscuits and spooned peach preserves into a little dish. Gideon took the chair across from his son, not at the head of the table, not apart from them, but close enough that Noah could reach him if he wanted. For several minutes, nobody spoke much. Noah ate half a biscuit, then pushed the other half toward Gideon. "Daddy bite." Gideon looked at the biscuit as if it were a contract with unfamiliar terms. Maggie hid her smile behind a coffee cup. Gideon took the bite. Noah nodded satisfied. Outside, the rain had stopped. Water dripped from the eaves in slow silver threads. The garden beyond the kitchen window looked washed clean, the grass dark and shining, the oaks holding their moss like old secrets. For 1 hour, the world stayed gentle. Then the phone rang. Gideon's phone, set face down beside his coffee, vibrated against the table. Noah flinched. Maggie saw it. Gideon saw it too. He did not grab the phone. He did not answer with his usual clipped command. He placed one hand flat on the table where Noah could see it. "Just a phone," he said. Noah stared at it. The phone buzzed again. Gideon turned it off. Silas looked at him sharply. Gideon did not look back. Noah relaxed by degrees, shoulders, dropping fingers, loosening around the edge of his plate. Maggie watched Gideon then, and something inside her ached with hope she did not trust. After breakfast, Noah went with Mrs. Leland to wash sticky peach preserves from his hands. Silas stepped out to take the calls. Gideon refused. The kitchen emptied until only Maggie and Gideon remained. The warmth between them thinned into something more complicated. Maggie gathered plates. Gideon reached for one. "I can do that." She gave him a look. "You own half of Savannah. I doubt you know where Soap lives." "I am willing to learn." "That sounds dangerous for the dishes." He took the plate anyway. For a while they worked side by side at the sink. Maggie washed. Gideon dried. He did it badly at first, leaving water along the rim of a glass. She took it back without a word and handed him a towel the way she corrected Noah, patient but firm. He accepted the correction without a fight. That frightened her more than his power. The old Gideon she understood. The cold man in the suit, the king of docks, and whispered debts, the man who could end a loan shark's empire before sunrise. That man was dangerous, but his shape was clear. This man, standing in a quiet kitchen drying a child's plate with careful hands, was harder to resist because he did not feel like fantasy. He felt like a choice being made in real time. Maggie turned off the water. "I need to leave for a while." Gideon's hand stilled on the towel. His face did not change quickly. It closed slowly like a heavy door. "For how long, I don't know." He set the plate down. "Noah will ask for you." "I know." The words scraped her throat. "And what do you want me to tell him?" Maggie gripped the edge of the sink. "That I had to think. About me. About this house." He looked toward the hallway where Noah's voice floated faintly from somewhere upstairs. "And him." She turned anger and pain rising together. Do not use him to keep me here." Gideon's jaw tightened. The silence after her words was sharp. Then he nodded once. "You are right." She had expected argument. She had prepared for command persuasion, maybe even that quiet fury he wore like another suit. His agreement left her unsteady. Gideon placed the towel on the counter. "I do not want you to leave." The honesty struck the room with more force than anger would have. Maggie looked down. "I love him. Noah. Yes. And me." Her breath caught. Gideon did not move closer. That made the question more intimate, not less. He stood across from her with daylight on his face and let the danger be hers to name. Maggie closed her eyes. "I think I could." His voice lowered. "That is not nothing." "No," she whispered. "It is too much." She opened her eyes and forced herself to meet his. "I cannot be another soft thing swallowed by this house. I cannot be the woman who keeps your son calm while men with guns decide what kind of world he grows up in. I cannot love a child and pretend not to notice the blood under the floorboards." Gideon said nothing, so Maggie kept going because stopping would mean crying. "I know what you are. I knew before I walked through the gate. Maybe not the details, but enough. And last night you spared Travis because I asked you to come back careful. I am grateful for that. But I need to know if that was one moment or if it is something you are willing to become." The words sat between them plain and heavy. Gideon looked out the kitchen window. In the garden, Noah ran after Mrs. Leland, laughing as she pretended to hide behind an oak tree. The sound reached them faintly through the glass. "I cannot become clean overnight," Gideon said. Maggie's eyes burned. "I did not ask you for a fairy tale." He looked back at her. "I can move the war away from this house. No meetings here. No blood brought through those gates. No men stationed outside his bedroom unless there is a direct threat. No using fear as the air my son breathes." Maggie listened, hardly breathing. "I can make the business smaller where it touches him," Gideon continued. "Cleaner where I can. Quieter where I cannot. There are parts of my world that cannot be undone with a promise in a kitchen, but I can decide what reaches my child. And me." His eyes softened. "You do not work beneath anyone here." Maggie swallowed. "That is not an answer. It is the beginning of one." He stepped closer, then stopped giving her space. "If you stay because you want to. Not because you owe anyone. Not because you are afraid of what waits outside. Not because I can pay you. Not because Noah needs you, though God knows he does." His voice roughened at the edge. "You stay because this house becomes more honest with you in it." Maggie shook her head, tears slipping free. "You make it sound noble." "No," he said. "I make it sound selfish, too. I want you here. I want your voice in my kitchen. I want my son to reach for you and know you will not vanish before breakfast. I want to hear you argue with me when I deserve it, which, according to you, is often." A broken laugh escaped her. His mouth curved faintly. "But I will not cage you with gratitude." That was the line that undid her. Not the love, not the money, not the promise of protection. The door. He was leaving it open. Maggie wiped her face with both hands. "If I stay, Noah gets a real child therapist. Someone patient. Someone who understands trauma. Not someone hired because they know how to flatter rich fathers." Gideon nodded. "Done." "And you go too." His expression changed. Maggie lifted her chin. "You heard me." "I did. Noah cannot be the only person in this house allowed to grieve." Gideon looked away. For a moment he was somewhere else again. At the window. At the fire. At the sound he could not forget. When he looked back, his eyes were dark and wet in a way Maggie had never seen. done," he said. "And the guards stop acting like he is a threat. Silas may struggle. Silas can struggle quietly while helping me bake." From the hallway, Silas's voice came dry and calm. "I heard that." Maggie startled. Gideon turned his head. "You were not meant to." "I hear most things, sir." Maggie wiped her cheeks and looked toward the doorway. Silas stood there with his hands folded in front of him, expression unreadable. "You can start with cinnamon rolls," she said. Silas considered this with grave seriousness. "I prefer biscuits." For the first time in months, maybe years. Gideon laughed. Not a polite sound, not a sharp breath, a real laugh, low and surprised, filling the kitchen like something rusty finding use again. Noah came running at the sound. What funny Gideon crouched before Maggie could tell him to. "Silas is going to bake." Noah's eyes widened. "Bad!" "Probably," Gideon said. Silas looked offended. Maggie laughed through the last of her tears. Noah reached for her and she picked him up. His body settled against hers with the familiar trust that had started everything. He touched her cheek, then frowned at the dampness there. Sad Maggie kissed his forehead. Not all sad. He seemed to accept this, then reached toward Gideon. Gideon stepped close and placed one hand on Noah's back, the other near Maggie's waist, not quite touching her until she leaned into him first. The three of them stood that way in the kitchen, while Mrs. Leland watched from the hall with one hand pressed over her heart. A week later, the changes began to take shape. The guards outside Noah's bedroom were moved to the end of the hall. The nursery door stayed open more often. Sunlight came in because Maggie pulled back the heavy curtains every morning, muttering that no child should grow up in a room that looked like it was waiting for a funeral. A therapist named Dr. Amelia Grant arrived on a Tuesday afternoon with a canvas bag full of puppets, picture cards, and quiet eyes. Noah hid behind Maggie's skirt for the first 10 minutes. Gideon stood near the window, stiff with suspicion. Dr. Grant did not push either of them. She sat on the floor and introduced a turtle puppet who was scared of loud sounds. Noah peeked around Maggie's leg. The turtle said in a very small voice that sometimes thunder made his shell feel too tight. Noah stepped closer. Gideon watched jaw tight as his son touched the turtle's head. Later, Dr. Grant asked Gideon if he would join one session a week. Gideon looked at Maggie. She looked back without rescue. "Yes," he said. The first session was ugly. Gideon did not know how to talk about Evelyn without turning every sentence into stone. Noah screamed when the word car came up. Maggie sat in the hallway with her hands clasped, fighting every instinct to rush in. But when the door opened, Noah was in Gideon's arms. Both of them looked wrecked. Both of them were still there. That night, Maggie baked until midnight. Gideon found her shaping dough in the kitchen flour on her hands and exhaustion under her eyes. "You bake when you are worried. You brood when you are awake." He leaned against the counter. "Then we are both predictable." She looked down at the dough. "How was it?" He was quiet long enough that she stopped kneading. Hard. She nodded. "Did you leave?" "No." "Did Noah know?" Then it was good. Gideon came around the counter slowly. He took her flour-dusted hand and turned it over, pressing his mouth to her palm. Maggie closed her eyes. No one had ever kissed her hand like it mattered. Not as a joke. Not as a performance. Not because a man wanted something from her. Gideon kissed it like her hands had held his world together, and he knew the weight of that. "Maggie," he said. She opened her eyes. He did not ask this time with words. She saw the question anyway. She stepped into him. The kiss was slow at first, careful enough to make her ache. Then deeper, warmer, full of everything they had held back in hallways, kitchens, nurseries, and doorways where grief was always listening. His hand settled at her waist. Hers rose to his jaw. He did not make her feel small. He made her feel met. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "You are beautiful," he said. The old instinct rose at once, to dismiss it, to joke, to shrink from the compliment before it became a weapon someone could take back. Gideon felt her pull inward. His thumb brushed her cheek. "Do not make yourself less comfortable for me to love." Maggie's breath shook. "I do not know how to be loved by a man like you." "Good," he whispered. "I have never loved a woman like you." She laughed softly, and this time the laugh did not break. Months passed with no clean edges. Noah still had storms. Loud trucks still made him cover his ears. Some nights he woke crying for his mother, and Gideon would sit on the floor beside the bed reading the same story 3 times until Noah's breathing slowed. Maggie stayed when she was needed, left when father and son needed the room to belong to them, and learned that love did not always mean stepping in. Sometimes it meant trusting someone else to hold the hurting part. The house changed in visible ways too. The dining room opened for actual dinners. Noah's toys migrated shamelessly into formal spaces. The guards learned to step around wooden train tracks that crossed priceless rugs. Mrs. Leland allowed finger paintings on the refrigerator after pretending to object for exactly 1 afternoon. Silas did learn to bake. Badly. His first biscuits came out hard enough that Noah tried to use one as a wheel for a toy truck. Maggie laughed until she cried. Silas took the criticism in silence, then appeared the next morning with an apron and a notebook. Gideon watched it all from the doorway, often with coffee in hand, sometimes with Noah leaning against his leg. One Saturday, he drove Maggie into the historic district. She thought they were visiting Mrs. Bellamy to formalize her new position. Instead, the car stopped in front of a small brick storefront on a quiet corner shaded by live oaks. The windows were dusty. The door stuck when Gideon opened it. Inside, sunlight fell across bare floors and an old counter left by the previous tenant. Maggie stepped in slowly. The air smelled of wood dust and possibility. "What is this?" Gideon stood behind her. "You tell me." She turned in a slow circle. There was room for ovens along the back wall, a case near the front, small tables by the windows, a bell above the door. She could almost smell coffee, cinnamon, peaches, warm bread cooling before sunrise. Her chest tightened. "No. Yes. Gideon, it is not a gift." She gave him a look through sudden tears. "Then what do you call a whole bakery an investment?" She laughed once, shaky and disbelieving. "I cannot let you buy me a dream. You are not letting me buy it." He handed her a folder. Her name was on the first page. Maggie Carter, majority owner. She stared at it until the letters blurred. "You would own 51%, Gideon said. "The rest is capital investment payable on your terms. Mrs. Leland already wants to manage opening week. Silas has requested that his biscuit failures remain confidential." Maggie pressed the folder to her chest. "You did all this without asking me." He looked briefly guilty, which was new enough to delight her even through tears. "I had hoped the paperwork would make the apology easier." She shook her head, smiling and crying at once. "You are still bossy. I am improving slowly." Noah. Already chose the name. Maggie narrowed her eyes. "This should worry me." Gideon opened the door to the back room. Noah burst out with Mrs. Leland behind him, holding a crayon drawing of a lopsided biscuit with wings. "Storm biscuit," Noah announced proudly. Maggie looked at Gideon. "Absolutely not." Noah frowned. Gideon lifted both hands. "I gave no opinion." Silas appeared from the back with a measuring tape. "I voted against it." Noah glared at him. "Bad biscuit, man." Maggie laughed so hard she had to sit on the dusty counter. In the end, the bakery became Carter House. On opening morning, the line reached the corner. Some came because they had heard Gideon Cole had invested. Some came because Mrs. Leland had bullied half of Savannah society into buying pastries. Some came because Silas stood near the door looking so grim that people were afraid not to purchase something. But they came back because Maggie's biscuits tasted like butter peaches and being welcomed somewhere you had not expected to belong. Noah sat at a small table near the window coloring while Gideon read beside him. When the bell over the door rang too sharply, Noah flinched, then looked at his father. Gideon placed a hand on the table. "Just the bell." Noah breathed. "Just the bell," he repeated. Maggie saw it from behind the counter. Her eyes met Gideon's across the warm, crowded room. No grand speech passed between them. They did not need one. That evening, after the bakery closed, they returned to the mansion under a violet Savannah sky. Fireflies sparked over the lawn. The curtains were open. Music drifted from the kitchen where Mrs. Leland hummed off-key and Silas argued with an oven timer. Noah ran ahead with a wooden airplane in his hand. Maggie stopped. For 1 second, her body remembered the library. The hit to her shoulder, the boy's rage, the crack of wood against bone. Gideon noticed. So did Noah. The child looked at the airplane, then at Maggie. He walked back to her and placed it gently in her hands. "No throw," he said. Maggie knelt in the grass. No throw. Noah climbed into her arms and kissed her nose just as he had the first night. This time, nobody stood frozen in shock. Gideon only smiled. Maggie held Noah close while the old mansion glowed behind them, no longer a tomb of polished stone, no longer a fortress pretending not to grieve. It was still guarded, still powerful, still touched by danger at the edges. But inside its walls, a child laughed. A father stayed. A woman who once believed she took up too much space had filled every empty room with warmth. Gideon came to stand beside her, his hand settling gently at her back. Noah pointed at the fireflies. Stars. Maggie looked across the dark lawn, then up at Gideon. Close enough. The three of them stood beneath the moss-covered oaks as the night deepened around the house, and for once, nothing in the silence was waiting to break.